That night, under a chandelier and 100 eyes, I thought we had made it. It was our anniversary. The champagne was poured, the music was soft. Then he raised his glass and smiled like a politician. After 30 years, he said, "I think I want freedom." The room gasped before I did. Someone dropped a fork. His mother smiled. And I just stood there with a glass in my hand, realizing that freedom was his new word for someone younger. But I didn't break. I didn't cry. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't rage. It's composure. So I lifted my own glass, looked him straight in the eye, and gave him a toast he'll never forget. And when I was done, he couldn't speak. If you've ever been blindsided and still stood tall, this story is for you. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's begin. The old house smelled like oak and old candles that night. It was supposed to be a celebration, 30 years of marriage, 30 years of us. Friends, neighbors, even the choir ladies from church filled the dining room, laughing, clinking glasses, taking photos under the golden chandelier Martin had installed himself. I had spent the whole morning arranging lilies. The kind he used to say reminded him of our wedding day. Funny how we keep trying to decorate what's already fading. I remember looking at him across the table, his gray suit pressed, his smile polite but distant, the kind of smile you give a stranger. He looked relieved in a way, and I didn't know why. Not yet. When the waiter poured champagne into my glass, I stood up and said, "To 30 years of building something that lasted." People clapped. I caught Martin's eyes for a second, cold, unblinking, and then he cleared his throat. 30 years, he said, his voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the room. 30 years is long enough, Evie. I'm done pretending. The air shifted. It was like someone had pulled the plug from a bathtub full of noise. Everything just drained out. Forks froze midair. Someone coughed. My niece's phone stopped recording. I thought he was joking. I even smiled at first. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, still holding my glass. But he just slipped his hand into his jacket and pulled out a folded stack of papers. "Divorce papers," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I wanted you to have them on a special day." He laughed, a short, nervous sound, and then his mother, sitting 2 seats away, placed her hand on his shoulder like she'd rehearsed it. "It's for the best, dear," she said sweetly, eyes never leaving mine. "It's strange how betrayal doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in slow, quiet, like cold water under a locked door." I felt my fingers tremble around the glass. The bubbles rose, then stopped. I remember the sound of a spoon dropping somewhere, the faint hum of the ceiling fan. My throat tightened, but no tears came. All I could think was, not here. Not in front of them. So I set my glass down. Slowly, carefully. The tablecloth rustled, and for a moment, I heard the faint crackle of the old radio in the kitchen. Some gospel song playing on low, almost like a whisper from another life. I looked straight at him. "You may leave the house, Martin," I said quietly. "But don't forget who built it." Twice. The first time I built it, I was 26 and in love. The second time, well, that was when he lost his job and I worked 3 summers teaching kids how to play piano just to pay for the new roof. He laid the bricks, but I kept the lights on. The guests didn't know where to look. His mother's smile froze like plaster. My hands were still trembling, but my voice was steady. That surprised even me. He blinked as if waiting for me to cry, to beg, to break. But I just stood there, my back straight, my heart quietly burning. Someone finally muttered, "Should we maybe go?" The laughter from earlier turned to whispers. The gospel song grew louder, and I swear I could hear the line, "His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me." Martin shoved the papers toward me, but I didn't take them. "You'll hear from my lawyer," he said. His tone clipped, almost businesslike. I smiled barely. "I'm sure I will." He walked away, his mother following close behind, whispering something about how embarrassing this all was. The door closed behind them, but the silence they left It stayed. I sat down finally, staring at the half-empty champagne flute in front of me. My reflection rippled in the bubbles. For a second my lip quivered. Just 1 second. Then I inhaled, let the air fill the cracks inside me, and stood again. To the few guests still frozen in place I said softly, "Thank you all for coming. Please, finish your meals. There's no need to waste good food." The few of them nodded, unsure if they should stay or hug me. I waved gently, pretending to smile. "Really, it's fine. I'm fine." When the last guest left, I turned off the lights in the dining room. The chandelier dimmed, and shadows stretched across the hardwood floor like long, quiet memories. In the kitchen, the radio still played. The song had changed. Now it was Amazing Grace. I leaned against the counter, listening to the words I'd sung so many times at church. For the first time, they didn't sound like a hymn. They sounded like a promise. I picked up the divorce papers from the table, smoothed the edges, and placed them inside the drawer where I kept old love letters and receipts for house repairs. Not as a keepsake, just as proof that I'd survived it. You know, people always ask how heartbreak feels. But the truth? Doesn't feel like a storm. Feels like silence. Like standing in the middle of your own living room and realizing it doesn't belong to you anymore. That night I went upstairs, took off my necklace, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't broken, just tired. Tired but still here. And that's when I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "You've built before. You can build again." The radio faded to static, then went quiet. And in that silence something inside me shifted. Not anger, not revenge. Just a quiet kind of strength. The kind that grows roots before it rises. If you've ever been through something that cracked your heart wide open, you'll understand. Sometimes you don't need to fight back. Sometimes you just need to stand still long enough to let the dust settle, so you can see what's worth rebuilding. That night, the house didn't sound like home. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear things you wish you hadn't. Around midnight, I woke up to the creak of floorboards downstairs. At first, I thought Martin was just getting water. But then I heard voices. His voice. And hers. His mother. "She won't suspect a thing," he whispered. And then her voice, low, calm, practiced. "Just sign her out quietly before the lawyer gets involved." I froze at the top of the stairs. My heart didn't race, it sank. I could almost hear it drop somewhere inside my chest. Sign her out? What did that even mean? The old clock in the hallway ticked between their sentences, louder and louder. I stood there in my robe, barefoot on the cold steps, and realized they weren't talking about divorce papers. They were talking about the house. A chair scraped. Footsteps. I darted back into the shadows just before Martin came into view, carrying his briefcase. His mother followed him to the door like a proud coach sending her player into the game. "Don't hesitate, Martin," she said softly. "You've earned that house." The door clicked shut. Silence. I stood there for a full minute before I walked downstairs. The living room still smelled like his cologne. His phone sat on the edge of the coffee table, the screen glowing faintly. One message unread. "Call A at 10 o'clock, she's ready." A? I stared at it until the screen went black. Then I picked it up, took a photo of the message, and set it down exactly where I found it. When he came to breakfast the next morning, he looked fresh, too fresh. He poured coffee, kissed the air near my cheek, and said, "You didn't sleep much, huh?" "I heard you on the phone last night," I said, trying to sound casual. "Who's?" He blinked once. Just once. "Avery. My assistant. I told her to prep for a meeting." I nodded, even smiled. "Avery, huh? Okay." He left for work whistling, the way people do when they think they've gotten away with something. When he was gone, I sat at his desk, opened his calendar on the laptop. There it was, 10 a.m., a meeting with Angela. Not Avery. Angela. The same young woman who'd come to our house last spring to photograph the renovation for the company portfolio. She'd worn perfume that smelled like rain. I'd complimented her on it. I remember because Martin couldn't stop talking about how professional she was after she left. I closed the laptop and sat still for a while, staring out the window. The morning light fell through the blinds, cutting the kitchen into lines of gold and shadow. There's a strange calm that comes after you discover a lie. Like the world pauses, waiting to see what kind of person you'll become next. I walked to the piano in the corner, the one I'd taught generations of kids to play on. The wood felt cool beneath my fingers. I pressed a single key, a minor. It echoed through the empty room, fragile and soft. My hand trembled on the next note. I couldn't tell if it was anger or heartbreak that made it shake. I thought about the night he'd proposed, right here in this same room. How he'd promised to build me a home, not just a house. And here we were. He'd built walls, but I'd built a life. The tears didn't come, not yet. Just that dry sting behind my eyes, the one that burns without falling. I played a few more notes, then stopped halfway through a hymn my mother used to love. That's when I remembered her notebook, the one she kept by the window with her Bible verses and grocery lists mixed together. I pulled it from the drawer, dusted off the cover, and flipped to the last page she'd written on before she passed. Her handwriting was soft and looping, just like her voice when she'd read scripture to me as a child. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. I ran my fingers over the words. The ink had faded a little, but the message hadn't. I closed the book and took a long breath. The truth was coming for me whether I wanted it or not. And maybe freedom was coming with it. I didn't feel strong yet. I didn't feel brave. I just felt awake. The clock struck 10 downstairs. Somewhere out there, Martin was meeting Angela, smiling the same smile he'd once saved for me. But that was fine. 'Cause now I wasn't pretending either. The next morning, I was still sitting at the kitchen table when I heard her car pull up. Mrs. Cole never called before she came. She just appeared like the morning mail or bad weather. I took a deep breath and fixed my hair, pretending not to dread whatever polite storm she was about to bring through my door. She walked in like she owned the place, pearls gleaming, perfume strong enough to outlast prayer. "Good morning, Evelyn," she said, her smile stretched too tight. "I thought I'd drop by, see how you're holding up after last night." After last night. She said it like it was a dinner gone wrong, not a public humiliation. I poured her tea the way I always did. It was easier to serve her than to fight her. "I'm fine," I said softly. "It's a lovely day, isn't it?" She stirred her tea, clinking the spoon against the cup a little too long. "You know, Evie," she said, lowering her voice, "you should really think about getting your affairs in order. Maybe write a will. While you still can. It'll save everyone trouble later." I looked up. Her tone was gentle, but her words carried teeth. "Why the sudden concern, Mrs. Cole?" I asked. "Oh, no reason, dear," she said, pretending to smile again. "It's just, with everything changing, it's smart to be prepared. You wouldn't want any confusion about ownership, especially of the house." Her eyes drifted slowly, deliberately, toward the safe in the corner of the study. She didn't need to say more. "Con du giấy tờ nhà ở đây chứ?" she asked in that syrupy tone she used when pretending to care. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I smiled, small, polite, careful. "No," I said quietly, handing her a fresh cup. "I sent them somewhere safer." Her spoon froze midair. She looked at me for half a second longer than she meant to. That's when I saw it, the flicker of frustration behind her calm face. She was fishing, and she'd caught nothing. "Well," she said, placing the cup down and adjusting her coat, "I'm glad to see you're being cautious. I've learned from the best," I said, still smiling. When she stood to leave, I walked her to the door, every step of hers clicking sharp against the wood floor. Outside the sun was too bright. She adjusted her sunglasses, patted my hand and said, "You're stronger than you look, dear. But don't wait too long to do the right thing." She got into her silver sedan and drove off down the long driveway. I watched the car disappear past the trees until the sound of the engine faded. Then my smile dropped. There it was, the shift. The quiet moment when fear turns into awareness. I knew now this wasn't about Martin's pride or his midlife crisis. It was strategy. The slow, polite heist of my life. I walked back inside, every creak of the house sounding heavier than before. I stopped in the living room, running my fingers along the old piano's edge. The sunlight fell across the walls, the same way it had 30 years ago when this house was nothing but wood and hope. Back then we were kids, two dreamers with a blueprint and a pile of bricks. My father had lent us the money for the down payment. My mother brought sandwiches to the construction site every weekend, saying, "A home is just a house until you fill it with music." Martin would come home with cement dust in his hair, smiling, proud. "We're building forever," he'd say. And I believed him. I could still picture the moment we signed the final paper. How he'd kissed my forehead and whispered, "This is ours." I didn't know then how fragile that word ours could be, how easily it can turn into mine. I looked around the living room now. The photographs, the chipped vase from our honeymoon, the curtains my mother sewed by hand. Every object in this house had a story that started with love and ended with effort. My effort. I whispered to no one, he laid the bricks. But I built the life inside. The air felt heavier after I said it, but also clearer. Like finally naming something you've known all along. The kettle on the stove began to whistle, startling me back to the present. I turned it off and stood still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a dog outside. For years I thought silence meant peace. Now I knew it could also mean warning. Somewhere out there, Martin was setting his pieces on the board. His mother had just made her first move. But I wasn't the same woman they thought I was. Not the quiet wife who smiled and looked away. I'd learned to build before. I could build again. That afternoon I sat down at Martin's desk. His chair still smelled like his cologne, sharp and expensive. The kind of scent that lingers long after a person should have been gone. I opened the laptop more out of instinct than plan. The screen flickered to life and there it was. His search history sitting wide open like a confession. How to remove spouse from house deed. Hidden divorce strategies. Can a husband sell property without wife's consent? My fingers froze on the mouse. For a second I thought maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was some random ad or a client's research. But no, the tabs were still open, bookmarked, neatly labeled. He wasn't being careless, he was being confident. It hit me all at once. He didn't think I'd ever look. He didn't think I was capable of suspecting. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking beneath me, and whispered, "So that's what we've become." The phone rang. I jumped. It was Clara. My best friend from college, a retired attorney with a heart like a lion and the patience of a saint. "Evie," she said, her voice tight. "I wasn't sure if I should call you, but I just saw Martin." My stomach dropped. "Where?" "At the county registry office," she said. And he wasn't alone. There was a young woman with him, blonde, mid-30s, dressed like she owned the world. They looked comfortable. Angela. It had to be her. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just cold. Like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Clara," I whispered, "what do I do?" "You protect yourself," she said firmly. "You start documenting everything. Every message, every file, every conversation. And you do it quietly. Don't confront him yet. Not until you're ready." Her voice steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. "And Evie," she added, "I know you. You'll want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but don't. You don't owe him that." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "I understand." After we hung up, I grabbed a flash drive from the drawer and started working. One click after another, emails, screenshots, call logs. His browser showed transfers between his business account and an unknown card labeled AM Interiors. Angela's initials. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. I printed everything. The sound of the printer became a rhythm, steady and grounding, like my own heartbeat saying, "You can do this." I labeled each folder one by one. Bank statements, property files, messages, photos. When I was done, I sat back and looked at the pile of paper on the table. My marriage reduced to evidence. It was late by the time I finished. The house was dark except for the small lamp by the piano. I turned on the old radio. It hummed for a second before finding a station. The soft, trembling notes of Amazing Grace filled the room. I hadn't heard that song since my mother's funeral. She used to sing it when I was scared as a child, whispering, "Grace doesn't always stop the storm, honey. Sometimes it just keeps you standing through it." I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me. I once was lost, but now am found. My throat tightened. The tears came silent and uninvited. They fell onto my hands, blurring the ink on one of the pages I'd printed. I whispered into the empty room, "God, I won't beg. I'll build again." The candle on the table flickered, the flame bending and straightening like it was listening. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. My heart still ached, but it was a different kind of pain now, less like breaking, more like hardening into something unshakable. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the soft light trembling against the walls. That was the moment I realized I wasn't waiting for rescue. No miracle, no apology was coming. Just me, my faith, and a stack of proof. I didn't know exactly how I'd fight back yet, but I knew I would. And as the song faded and the candle burned low, I whispered to the silence, "Grace isn't weakness. It's preparation." The tears had dried. My hands had stopped shaking. Tomorrow I'd start again. Clara's office smelled like old paper and rain, the kind of place where the air itself carried stories of people who'd walked and broken and left standing taller. She looked up from her desk the moment I walked in. "Evie," she said, standing to hug me, "I was hoping you'd come." "I'm not here for revenge," I told her quietly. "I just want fairness." Her eyes softened. "That's exactly why you'll win." We sat down across from each other, the table between us scattered with coffee cups, pens, and the faint hum of the air conditioner filling the pauses. She opened the file I'd brought. Our house deed, the old loan papers, even faded receipts from when my father helped pay for the foundation. "You still remember the day this house was built?" she asked, scanning the pages. "Like it was yesterday," I said. "My dad called it our family's investment in the future." Clara tapped one line on the document, her red nail polish catching the light. "Dear, this is the original purchase transfer from your parents' account. The property was bought before Martin's name was ever added." I leaned forward, heartbeat quickening. "So legally it was mine first?" She nodded. "Exactly. It's a premarital contribution which gives you claim. But Evie," she paused, meeting my eyes, "don't show your hand too early. Let them think you're still lost in shock. The quieter you are, the safer your ground becomes." I exhaled, the mix of fear and relief leaving my chest. "You mean pretend to be weak?" Clara smiled slightly. "No, pretend to be still. Stillness makes people underestimate you. It's the best kind of armor." For a while we just sat in silence, the only sound the scratching of her pen as she marked key details. Every stroke felt like a small piece of my strength coming back. When I left her office, the sky had turned the color of soft steel. A light drizzle misted the sidewalks, and I walked without an umbrella, letting the rain touch my face. It felt cleansing, like washing off the last layer of fear. When I got home, there was a letter waiting in the mail pile. No return address, just my name written in my aunt's elegant handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. She had passed 2 months ago. A quiet woman who'd spent her life teaching music in Atlanta. I thought she'd left nothing behind except her old piano and her kindness. Inside was a letter and a folded document. "To my dear Evelyn," it read, "you were always the one who listened when others talked over you. I've left you my savings and my catalog of compositions, registered and copyrighted. Use them however your heart leads. You've earned peace, and music deserves to live through you." My hands trembled as I unfolded the attached document. A modest inheritance, but enough to start over. Enough to breathe again. I smiled, something inside me settling into place. Maybe this was how grace worked. Not through miracles but through timing. That night, I sat at my desk with the letter beside me and opened a new bank account. The glow of the screen painted the room in a soft blue light. I transferred a portion of the inheritance, labeling it simply, New Beginnings Fund. It wasn't about money, it was about reclaiming space. My own space. The house was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. I lit a small candle, its flame flickering gently, and opened my notebook. The same one that now carried my mother's verse, "The truth shall make you free." I took a pen and began to write beneath it. He thinks silence is surrender. The pen paused for a breath. Then I continued. He forgot silence can build storms. I stared at the words, reading them aloud under my breath. They sounded calm. Not angry, not bitter, just true. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, faint but steady, like the beginning of something inevitable. I closed the notebook and placed my aunt's letter on top of it. Then I blew out the candle. For a moment, the smoke curled upward like a question before fading into nothing. But I already knew the answer. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to break things to prove my strength. I just needed to wait. And when the time came, I'd let the truth speak louder than any revenge ever could. Downstairs, the house hummed with voices again. I stood at the top of the stairs, hidden behind the half-closed door to Martin's study. His mother's laugh cut through the air like silver, sharp, practiced, pretending warmth. "Martin, your speech has to sound dignified," she said. "You're not leaving her out of cruelty. You're setting yourself free." He chuckled. "Yeah, I'll say something like, after 30 years we've grown apart. I wish her peace." That should sound noble enough. I covered my mouth before the sound escaped me. They were rehearsing, planning my public humiliation like a performance. "Make sure you thank her," Mrs. Cole added. "People respect a man who stays polite. We don't want pity for her. We want understanding for you." "I know, Mom," he said. "Don't worry. Tomorrow night, everyone will see I'm doing the right thing." My knees nearly gave out. For a second, I pressed my forehead against the doorframe just to stay upright. The words came muffled through the wood, but every one of them landed sharp as glass. When the door finally closed behind them, I slipped into the study. The room smelled of ink and bourbon. Their notes still sat on the desk, his printed draft speech, her handwritten reminders in neat cursive. "Smile during pause. Hold hand on heart when you say truth." They had turned betrayal into choreography. I sat down, took a slow breath, and wiped my face with my sleeve. The tears came fast and hot, but they didn't last long. I reached for the folder Clara had given me and started spreading everything out. The property record, the inheritance letter, the bank statements. Proof of what was mine. Proof that I wasn't powerless. The printer whirred to life as I made fresh copies of everything. The sound steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat returning to normal after too much pain. When it stopped, I stacked the pages neatly, clipped them together, and slid them into a black folder. I placed it inside my purse, next to the folded Bible verse I always carried. "The truth shall make you free." It was almost midnight. Upstairs, the mirror in my bedroom caught the faint glow of the lamp as I stood before it. My reflection looked older somehow, but clearer too. I reached into the closet and pulled out a black dress. Simple, elegant, unassuming. The kind of dress you wear to funerals or rebirths depending on what's being buried. I slipped it on, smoothing the fabric down, and looked at myself closely. My eyes were still red from crying, but my shoulders were straight. "Forgive them, Lord," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "For they know not what they do." It wasn't bitterness. It was mercy, the kind that comes when you stop waiting for people to change and start preparing for peace instead. The lamp flickered, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. I didn't turn it back on. Instead, I lit a small candle from the dresser. Its flame threw soft gold over the mirror, painting light across the black fabric of my dress. The house was quiet again. only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of rain against the windows. I looked down at the folder on my bed. The candles glow dancing over its edges. Inside it lay everything, my proof, my past, my escape. I sat at the edge of the bed and let the stillness settle in. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere far away, slow and low like a warning, or maybe a promise. I closed my eyes, letting that sound roll through me. Calm before the storm, they say. But for me it didn't feel like calm. Felt like faith. The ballroom shimmered under golden lights, the kind of glow that made everything look more beautiful than it really was. 120 guests filled the room, friends, colleagues, even a few strangers who just wanted a free drink and a story to tell later. Glasses clinked, laughter bounced off the chandeliers, and for a moment, it almost felt like a celebration. Almost. Then Martin took the microphone. He smiled, that fake, confident smile, the kind he practiced in mirrors before job interviews and lies. "Good evening, everyone," he began, voice smooth as silk. 30 years of marriage. That's a lifetime for some. And tonight I realized something important. I need a different life. A new chapter. The younger spirit beside me. The air changed. A ripple of disbelief spread through the crowd. A woman gasped. Someone dropped their glass. The band stopped playing mid-note. He kept talking as if the silence encouraged him. "Evelyn and I, we've simply grown apart. There's no anger, no drama. Just truth." I stood up slowly. My hand brushed against the table, steadying myself. My heart wasn't racing. It was too tired for that. He turned toward me, expecting tears, maybe a scene. Instead, I took the microphone from his hand. For a second my fingers trembled, but when I spoke my voice came out calm, clear enough to cut through the noise. "You said you built this home, Martin." I looked him right in the eye. "But you forgot, you built it on my father's land." A hush fell. I reached into my purse and pulled out the black folder. Every page I'd printed, every line Clara helped me highlight, every proof of what was truly mine. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the deed my parents signed before your name was ever on it. This," I laid down another paper, "is the record of every payment they made to build the foundation you've been standing on. And this," I raised the last page, "my aunt's will, her signature glowing under the chandelier light. This is the inheritance that ensures I'll never need what you tried to steal." Murmurs erupted. People leaned forward, phones lifted. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Martin's smile faltered. I stepped closer, my tone still steady, almost kind. "You thought silence meant surrender. But you were wrong." I turned toward the young woman standing by the bar. Angela, his new chapter, trembling in her expensive heels. "My dear," I said gently, "the house built on betrayal never stands." You could have heard a pin drop. Then all at once the crowd broke into murmurs, gasps, then applause. It started small, one clap, then another, until it filled the entire room. "She's a queen," someone shouted from the back. Laughter followed, but it wasn't mocking. It was proud, empowered. People began recording, phones raised high. The hum of justice was contagious. Martin's face turned pale. His mother tried to step forward, but no one let her. Even the waiter froze in place, unsure whether to clear glasses or bear witness. A woman from the front table stood up. "You go, Evelyn," she said. "It's about time someone stood up for themselves." Martin tried to speak, but the room drowned him out. Every sentence he'd rehearsed, every line of his polished speech, gone, buried under applause. I handed the microphone back to the host, turned to the crowd and said, "Thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Truth has already been served." And with that I walked toward the exit. Behind me the sound swelled, cheers, voices, people chanting my name like I'd done something extraordinary. But I hadn't. I just refused to stay quiet. As I reached the door, someone yelled, "The silent storm." And suddenly others echoed it, laughing, clapping, shouting it like a rally cry. By the time I stepped outside, my phone was already buzzing. Notifications. Mentions. Someone had uploaded the whole thing online. The caption read, "Wife flips the script at her anniversary party." The silent storm. The night air hit my face, cool and fresh, washing away the noise from inside. Through the ballroom windows I saw Martin, head down, surrounded by flashing lights and whispers. For once, the man who loved attention couldn't bear to be seen. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood there, breathing in the freedom I'd earned. Some storms don't need thunder to be powerful. Some only need silence and truth. And if you believe dignity speaks louder than revenge, comment "silent storm." The video spread like wildfire. Within 24 hours it had over 6 million views, with headlines screaming "The Silent Storm." Woman destroys husband's public betrayal with grace. Reporters called, networks emailed. Strangers tagged me in posts that said things like "she's a legend." But I didn't answer any of them. I didn't want fame. I wanted quiet. So I packed a few boxes, locked the old house behind me, and moved to a small lake cabin my aunt once loved. It wasn't fancy, white shutters, uneven floors, the smell of pine everywhere. But it was mine. Entirely mine. The mornings there were slow and soft. Mist drifted over the lake, and when the sun rose it caught on the ripples like scattered gold. I'd sit by the window with my coffee and think about how, for the first time in years, no one expected me to smile, explain, or forgive on command. After a few weeks I put an old piano in the front room. A scratched upright I'd found in a thrift store. I opened the windows, let the breeze wander in, and started playing again. Word spread through the small town that a music teacher had moved in by the lake, and soon I had a handful of students, kids with stories as bruised as mine. There was Ellie, who wouldn't talk above a whisper. Mason, who always showed up late but never missed a note. And tiny Lila, whose laughter filled every corner of the room. They came from homes that echoed with noise but not love. I recognized that sound. It was the sound of trying to be brave in a house that didn't see you. So I taught them not just how to play but how to listen. I told them, every song starts with silence. Respect it. That's where truth hides. Sometimes when the lessons ended, I'd stay by the piano long after they'd gone, tracing the worn keys, thinking of everything I'd lost, and everything I'd gained by walking away. One afternoon I heard a car pull up. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped outside. It was my son Evan, the oldest, the one who hadn't spoken much since the divorce. He stood by the car, taller than I remembered, looking unsure for the first time in his life. "Hey Mom," he said quietly. "I saw the video." Everyone did. I smiled gently. "So I've heard." He looked down, kicking at a pebble. "For a long time I didn't understand you. The way you stayed quiet when Dad shouted, the way you smiled when people were cruel. I thought silence meant surrender." He looked up, eyes shining. "But now I get it. Your silence was strength, not weakness." For a moment I couldn't speak. I just reached up and touched his cheek the way I used to when he was little. "You build once for others," I said softly, "and once for yourself. This time I'm building for me." He nodded, smiling through tears. "I'm proud of you, Mom." We sat by the lake until the sun began to fade, not needing words. The sound of water lapping against the dock filled the spaces between us. Gentle, forgiving. The next morning, the radio crackled to life as I made breakfast. A familiar melody drifted through the static. "His eye is on the sparrow," stopped me in my tracks. That song had followed me through every dark season. My mother used to hum it while folding laundry, whispering, "He watches even the smallest things, Evie. You're never forgotten." I turned up the volume. The voice on the radio was warm, trembling with faith. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? I looked out the window. The sun had just broken through the clouds, its light spilling across the piano. The dust in the air shimmered like floating notes, suspended mid-song. I closed my eyes, and for the first time there was no bitterness left. No weight, no sharp edges. Just peace. I forgive, I whispered, my voice almost blending with the music. Not because he deserves peace, but because I do. The words lingered in the air, soft but certain. Later that night, I lit a single candle on the piano and wrote the final line in my journal. Revenge ends a story. Dignity begins a new one. I sat back, watching the flame dance, its reflection glimmering across the window. The lake outside was still calm, waiting for dawn. And for the first time in years, so was I. If you've ever rebuilt after betrayal, drop a like in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Because sometimes the quietest storms rebuild the strongest homes.